Every once in a while, a game comes around that changes its genre. We've heard the term Doom clone or GTA clone, games that try to emulate the success of those that came before. Command & Conquer was to real-time strategy what Doom was to the first-person shooter genre. It wasn't the first RTS game, but what it did do was set the benchmark for all strategy games to come. Everything that came after was trying to be the next Command & Conquer. Some would succeed, and some would fail, but none would ever redefine what it meant to create an RTS game quite like Westwood Studios did back in 1995. I'm Strategy Tom, and this is the classic review of Command & Conquer. The story of Command & Conquer is fantastic. We are thrown into an alternate 1995. Recently, a small meteorite has crash-landed near the River Tiber, just outside of Rome. From this meteorite came a substance that was named Tiberium. Throughout the game, we are constantly told about the baffling nature of Tiberium and how poorly understood it is, which keeps it simple for us, the player, as we don't have to pretend to understand what exactly Tiberium is. What we are told is that Tiberium is a plant-like substance. It grows in the ground and leaches not only nutrients, but minerals from the ground, and they then form a crystal-like substance. The obvious benefits of this is that there is now very little effort needed for the gathering of natural resources. Every metal, mineral, or other useful substance has all crystallised, and it's all just sitting over there in a big field, just waiting for you to gather it up. Then, the crystals are taken to a refinery and broken down into their composite parts. Easy. This means that Tiberium is not only the most precious substance on Earth, but wherever Tiberium spreads, it is the only precious substance. The obvious downside to this is that wherever Tiberium takes a foothold is eventually turned into an inhospitable wasteland. As a byproduct, Tiberium also produces clouds of toxic gases. In this new world, two major factions have risen. We are given the choice of whether we wish to play as the Global Defense Initiative, GDI for short, or the Brotherhood of Nod. GDI is a multinational military union. All the major nations of the UN have joined together to create a united military front. In the original Command & Conquer game, GDI is still beholden to the UN for funding and approval, something that does become important throughout the story. In opposition to GDI is the Brotherhood of Nod. Nod is described as a quasi-religious terrorist organisation. The members of the Brotherhood follow their charismatic leader, Cain. Throughout the game, we are told that Nod has existed for centuries, but only revealed themselves on the world stage after the arrival of Tiberium. Cain advocates for the use of Tiberium as a means to free the oppressed and downtrodden masses of the world, the ones who have been forgotten. Since their emergence, they have coerced and amalgamated every rebel, dissident and terrorist group into the Brotherhood, joining them all under one banner. They have the numbers and the zeal to take on GDI, and since they were the first major power to understand the benefits of Tiberium, they now have the resources too. This means that two world superpowers are now locked in a staring contest with one another, on the precipice of a worldwide conflict that would come to be known as the First Tiberium War. As I said earlier, Command & Conquer was not the first to implement this style of gameplay. In fact, it wasn't even the first game by Westwood Studios to use it. 3 years prior, in 1992, Westwood Studios released Dune: Battle for Arrakis. Dune acted as something of a proto-CNC, with many of the gameplay elements going forward into Command & Conquer. So, what are these gameplay elements? Well, they're pretty simple. The main campaign features two basic mission designs. The first of these are the base building missions, and these are by far the most common. They're also the better ones, which is to the game's credit. In these missions, the goal is simple. Build your base, defend your base, destroy the enemy's base. In order to do this, you'll need to manage two resources. The first one is power. Power powers your base, obviously. The more structures you build, the more power plants you'll need. If you run out of power, production will slow and certain structures will just stop working altogether. The second and most important resource is Tiberium. Tiberium grows in fields around the map, and in order to collect it, you build a refinery and deploy a harvester. It's all pretty simple stuff. That simplicity really is the heart of what makes Command & Conquer such a great game up until this very day. The idea that in 1995 the whole select and click approach to strategy games was a rarity is pretty astounding given the sheer volume that came after. Command & Conquer offers a simple premise, but with a large variety of unit types and strategies to keep players hooked. The difficulty curve in Command & Conquer is something to behold. The opening levels are incredibly simple, giving you a feel of what's to come without overbearing you. They're almost impossible to fail. The later missions though, oh boy, the later missions. They are brutal, and if you take your eye off the ball for a second, you'll be punished severely. I've often felt that modern strategy games have lent away from offering that high level of difficulty, so that players don't go through the frustrating learning curves that games like Command & Conquer requires. Personally, I'm sad that those days are fading away. Completing a game like Command & Conquer is not something you will simply achieve if you just while away the hours. It's an achievement, not one that everyone will do, and that's a definite bonus in my eyes. Command & Conquer was an innovative masterpiece in 1995, and I have no problem in saying that it holds up to this day. However, it's not perfect. This brings us to that second mission type I mentioned earlier, the missions that involve no base building. Now, what I am not saying is that the baseless missions are inherently bad and shouldn't be in the game. The GDI Commando mission is one of the highlights of the game. What I am saying is these missions are where the game's flaws become really apparent. I can't help but feel that sometimes your success or failure is down to blind luck, and that's not a good thing for any game, let alone a strategy game. What do I mean? Well, consider the Commando level I just mentioned. A Commando is an elite infantry unit that is capable of one-shot killing any infantry, and he has C4 explosives that can destroy any building. In the opening of this level, you must destroy a few SAM sites to allow a helicopter to arrive and help you. When destroying buildings, sometimes an injured infantry unit appears, sometimes two appear, sometimes none appear. After destroying a SAM site, there is no way for the Commando to kill said infantryman before he gets at least one shot off him. If he destroys all three SAM sites and they have all contained two injured soldiers, the Commando will be on death's door before the first objective is complete. Do you see how that's unfair? I could, in theory, reload the level and do the exact same thing and have finished that portion of the mission without a hair on his head being touched. There are mods that remove this frustration from the game, but the fact that it features in the base game is definitely a mark against it. There's also irritating programming where your infantry will all bunch up together, making them easy targets for a tank to squish under its treads. In a base building mission, it's annoying because you have to train more men. But in a level where you have to make do with what you're given, losing 5 men at once is pretty much game over. This isn't to say that poor programming is only relevant in these missions, as in missions with bases, your harvesters are programmed to be driven by suicidal morons. Harvesters will act largely autonomously unless you give them a direct order, and this sometimes means that they will seek out the quickest route to the nearest source of Tiberium, regardless of whether or not this route includes sauntering right through an enemy base. I said earlier that I don't mind a game that causes me frustration through difficulty, but I do hate it when I fail because of poor game design. That being said, I am in no way trying to say that these frustrations ruin the overall experience. Command & Conquer set a high bar for a reason. It's a game that 25 years after its release is still a fun and captivating game that will keep you entertained for hours. I'm afraid that my discussion and presentation may not have the more balanced approach I try to take with gameplay. Simply put, the presentation of Command & Conquer is what takes it from being an enjoyable game to a genre-defining work of art. First, let's talk about the big one, the mission briefs. What could easily have just been blocks of text telling you what to do were turned into wonderfully crafted live-action video segments. I thought that maybe I was sucked in by these so much simply because I was around 7 years old when I first played this game. but as a man in his early 30s, I had just as much fun as I recently dove into the remaster. Prior to each mission, you were given a mission briefing performed by actors. I could say that no one had done that before Command & Conquer came along, but really, who's done it since? The only ones I can think of have been the other Westwood titles like the sequels to Dune. They are so brilliantly immersive as the characters on screen talk directly to you, the commander. It makes you feel like you've been pulled into the game world along with them. As a kid, it amazed me. As an adult, I still sat there with a daft grin on my face as I was reintroduced to these characters. And on that note, the characters are great too. It would be reasonable to expect that the acting in a 90s strategy game might be subpar, to put it kindly. But all the performances are pretty fantastic. The scenes are brilliantly directed by Joe Kuchin, who also plays Nod's messiah-like figure, Kane. Kane is undoubtedly the greatest of the lot, and he just draws you in. The Brotherhood of Nod are definitely painted as the baddies in this game, but a few missions with Kane will have you shouting, "Down with GDI." The graphics on Command & Conquer have obviously aged in the last 25 years, and it would be silly of me to go on about how beautiful the game is. Even the 2020 remaster is essentially just a new lick of paint on the otherwise blocky sprites. However, for the time, Command & Conquer did look great. What had come before in the strategy genre were largely a collection of 2D top-down games. The 3D models and the animations really were fantastic. I remember being a kid and having a little giggle at the animation of the flaming man running around after he'd been zapped by Nod's obelisk of light defense. And by being a kid, I mean now, as an adult, obviously. While graphics obviously suffer with time, what has endured much more so is Command & Conquer's use of sound. The sound effects are excellently created. The gunfire, the explosions, the scorching noise of fire when a flame tank lets loose. It's all incredibly immersive and exciting. And then there's the soundtrack. Frank Klepacki really created something special with not just this soundtrack, but every Command & Conquer soundtrack. The music is genuinely fantastic and will get stuck in your head long after you've stopped playing. Good gameplay is, of course, the essential part of any gaming experience. But I don't think any game that has ever truly left a lasting impression has done so without amazing visuals, sound design and story. If there are negatives about the presentation to be said, it would just be nitpicking. It's just an amazingly well put together game. The way that Command & Conquer draws you in and makes you a part of the story, not passively watching the story, not even controlling a character within the story. You are the character. You are the commander. I can't think of many other games that I felt so personally connected to a game, and it was made back in 1995. Think about that. Gaming was still far from being treated as a serious medium back then. So, let's go through this section by section. Premise. Pros. An interesting sci-fi element, intriguing characters, and an engaging conflict with two diverse factions. Cons. Like with many games of this era, the lore is not fully fleshed out, and new players may be confused for a while as the information is drip-fed slowly. Gameplay. Pros. An easy to pick up, difficult to master curve. Simple controls and UI, and an amazing variety of weapons and tactics to explore. The cons. Some poor programming can lead to frustrating, game-breaking moments, and some players may find later levels painfully difficult, though the remaster does allow you to play with a lower difficulty setting. Presentation. The pros. The live-action briefings are wonderfully immersive. The soundtrack is phenomenal, and graphically it was strong for its time, made even better in the remaster. Cons. No. Sorry. Got nothing for you. So, how to rank a game like Command & Conquer? Is it the best RTS game ever made? Certainly not. It is a flawed game that would serve as a base on which to build. Westwood would go on to make a number of sequels for Command & Conquer which would improve upon the formula laid out in the original. So my overall feelings on Command & Conquer are that it was a seminal game of its genre, an excellent game that all fans of RTS games should play. If you've played it in the past, now is the time to go and check it out again. But it is also a flawed game, a blueprint to be built upon. For that reason, I'm giving Command & Conquer an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of Command & Conquer? Did you play it back in the day? Have you checked out the remaster? Sound off in the comments below and tell me which game should get the classic review treatment in the future. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'm Strategy Tom, and I'll see you next time.